The air in the Cerberus shaft tasted of ozone and decay. Elias Thorne wiped grime from his faceplate. The rhythmic hum of the mining drill a familiar lullaby. Below him, the asteroid's crust yielded to the tungsten teeth of the machine, spewing out veins of rare earth metals that funded the Aegis Corporation's galactic empire. Elias wasn't a soldier. He was a prospector, a man who spent his days chasing the glimmer of wealth in the void, far from the politics of Earth or the wars that raged on its fringes. His partner, Lena, monitored the readouts from the cockpit, her fingers dancing across the console. "Pressure's stabilizing," she said, her voice calm. "We're clear for another pass." Elias nodded, his gaze fixed on the drill's progress. The Cerberus shaft was one of the richest sites in the Kepler belt, but it was also one of the most isolated. That isolation was why Aegis had posted them here, far from prying eyes, far from oversight. Lena was the only person he trusted in this entire sector, and even she didn't know the full extent of his past. The scars on his back weren't from mining accidents. They were reminders of a war he'd fought in, a war he'd lost, and a weapon he'd sworn never to touch again. Suddenly, the drill's whine cut short. A low, guttural hum filled the chamber, vibrating through the soles of their boots. "What the hell is that?" Lena muttered, her fingers flying across the console. The seismic sensors blared red, not with the tremors of a cave-in, but with something else. Something alive. Elias grabbed his sidearm, a modified plasma pistol he'd jury-rigged from salvaged parts. "Get to the cockpit," he ordered, his voice tight. "Now." Lena didn't argue. She scrambled up the ladder, her movements swift and sure. Elias followed, his heart pounding. The hum grew louder, a chorus of synchronized clicks and drones that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Then he saw them. They weren't insects. Not exactly. They were chitinous, six-limbed creatures, their carapaces shimmering like oil on water. Their eyes, if they could be called that, were clusters of black, multifaceted lenses that swiveled in unison. They moved as one, a single entity split into a dozen bodies. The first one lunged, its mandibles clicking, and Elias fired. The plasma bolt vaporized it in a flash of blue light. But more took its place, their movements perfectly coordinated, as if they were all controlled by a single mind. "Seal the shaft," Elias yelled, backing toward the cockpit. The blast doors groaned as they slid shut, but the creatures slammed against them, their collective strength undeniable. Lena stared at the monitors, her face pale. "They're not just breaking through, Elias. They're rewriting the door's security. From the inside." Elias cursed. This wasn't a random infestation. This was an attack. A coordinated, intelligent attack. And it was aimed directly at them. The cockpit was a cramped, metal box, lit by the glow of the consoles. Lena's fingers flew across the keyboard, her brow furrowed in concentration. "I can't raise Aegis. The comms are jammed." She slammed her fist on the console. "Damn it." Elias leaned against the wall, his eyes fixed on the blast door. The creatures outside had stopped their assault, but their hum persisted, a constant, unnerving presence. "They're waiting," he said. "For something." Lena turned to him, her eyes wide. "What if they're not just here for the ore? What if they're after the colony?" Elias didn't answer. He remembered the war. The way the enemy had moved, in perfect sync, as if they shared a single thought. The way they'd overrun bases, turned soldiers against each other, and left nothing but silence in their wake. This was the same, only different. These creatures weren't just soldiers. They were a hive, a collective, and they were hunting. A klaxon blared. "Intruder alert" in the habitation module. Lena's voice crackled over the intercom. "Non-human life forms detected." "Repeat, non-human life forms detected." Elias grabbed his rifle. "Stay here. Lock the door." "But..." "Lock it, Lena." He didn't wait for her response. He sprinted down the corridor, his boots echoing in the silence. The lights flickered, casting long, dancing shadows. Then he heard it. The hum. Louder now. Closer. He rounded the corner and froze. The corridor was filled with them. Dozens of the chitinous creatures, their mandibles clicking in unison. They weren't attacking. They were just standing there, watching. One of them took a step forward. Its mandibles parted, and a voice emerged. Not a voice, but a sound, synthesized from a dozen throats. "You are not of the swarm." Elias raised his rifle. "And you're not welcome here." The creature tilted its head, its multifaceted eyes focusing on him. We seek the weapon, the one that breaks the song. Elias's blood ran cold. The weapon, the one he'd sworn to destroy. I don't know what you're talking about. The creature's mandibles clicked again, a sound that was almost amused. Liar. You carry the key. The one who remembers the silence. Before Elias could react, the swarm surged forward. He fired, the rounds tearing through their chitinous shells, but more took their place. They weren't just attacking him. They were surrounding him, herding him toward the habitation module's central chamber. The central chamber was a vast, circular room, dominated by a massive cylindrical structure, the colony's fusion core. It hummed with power, its blue glow casting long shadows across the walls. The swarm had followed him inside, their numbers now in the hundreds. They didn't attack. They just waited. Elias backed away, his rifle trained on them. What do you want? The collective hum grew louder, a wave of sound that pressed against his skull. The weapon, the synthesized voice repeated. The one that silences the song. Elias's mind raced. The weapon. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a system. A weaponized neurotoxin designed to disrupt hive minds. A weapon he'd helped create during the war. A weapon that had been deemed too dangerous to exist. He'd destroyed the prototypes, burned the research, and buried his past. But somehow they knew. You're too late, Elias said, his voice steady. There's no weapon here. One of the creatures stepped forward, its mandibles clicking. We feel it. The resonance. The flaw in your pattern. Elias froze. The flaw. He'd spent years studying the swarm's movements, their perfect synchronization, their lack of individuality. And he'd found it. A single, imperceptible lag in their collective consciousness. A flaw. A vulnerability. The creatures began to move, not as a single entity, but in a loose circle around him. Their mandibles clicked in a rhythm that was almost musical. You see the flaw, the voice said, but you do not use it. Why? Elias lowered his rifle slightly. Because using it would make me no better than them. The swarm fell silent. For a moment, the only sound was the hum of the fusion core. Then, the voice returned, softer this time. We do not understand. You have the power to end the song. Why do you refuse? Elias sighed. Because the song isn't the problem. The problem is the silence. The weapon doesn't just disrupt the hive. It destroys it, erases it. I won't be responsible for that. The creatures seemed to hesitate. Their movements became less synchronized, their mandibles clicking out of time. For the first time, they looked uncertain. Then, the lights flickered. The fusion core's glow dimmed. What's happening? Elias muttered. The swarm's hum grew frantic. The core, it's failing. The resonance is destabilizing. Elias looked up at the core, his blood running cold. The swarm wasn't here to attack. They were here to warn him. Something was wrong. Something was about to explode. The fusion core's hum grew erratic, the blue light pulsing like a dying heart. Lena, Elias yelled into his comm, what's happening? Static. Then her voice, strained. Elias, the core's overheating. The coolant systems are offline. It's going to blow in 10 minutes. Maybe less. Elias's mind raced. The swarm was still here, watching him. Their collective hum was a chaotic mess now, their movements disjointed. The flaw was growing, spreading. We need to vent the core, Elias said, more to himself than to them. But the manual override is in the maintenance bay, on the other side of the swarm. One of the creatures stepped forward, its mandibles clicking. We will guide you. The path is clear. Elias stared at them. Why help me? The swarm's hum softened. The song, it is broken. We feel fear. Fear. The concept was alien to them. And yet, here they were, offering help. All right, Elias said, hefting his rifle. Lead the way. The swarm parted, creating a narrow path through the chamber. Elias followed, his heart pounding. The maintenance bay was just down the corridor, but the swarm's movements were still erratic. The flaw was spreading, and with it, their cohesion. They reached the door, and one of the creatures placed a chitinous hand on the panel. The door slid open with a hiss. Inside, the maintenance bay was a mess of wires and consoles, steam hissing from a ruptured pipe. Override panels over there, Elias said, pointing. The swarm surged forward, but their movements were clumsy now. One of them stumbled, crashing into a console, sparks flying. Another let out a high-pitched screech, a sound Elias had never heard before. Panic! Stay back! Elias yelled, firing a warning shot. The creatures flinched, retreating to the edges of the room. He sprinted to the console, his fingers flying across the keypad. The coolant systems were offline, but the manual override was still accessible. He entered the sequence, his breath held. The screen flickered, then turned green. Venting initiated, he muttered. The hum of the fusion core stabilized. The blue light returned to normal. Elias slumped against the console, relief washing over him. Then he heard it. A low, guttural sound from the doorway. He turned. The swarm was gone. All except one. The creature stood alone in the doorway, its chitinous form trembling. Its mandibles clicked erratically, its multifaceted eyes darting around the room. It was broken. The flaw had consumed it. Elias raised his rifle. Don't move. The creature didn't respond. It just stared at him, its movements jerky, uncoordinated. The collective hum was gone. In its place was a single, ragged sound. A whimper. Elias lowered his rifle slightly. What happened to the others? The creature's mandibles clicked, the sound disjointed. They left. The song, it was too loud. Elias frowned. The song? What song? The creature tilted its head, its eyes focusing on him. The resonance. The flaw. It hurts. Elias remembered the weapon. The neurotoxin. It didn't just disrupt the hive. It shattered it. Turned a collective into individuals. Into this. Why did you help me? Elias asked. The creature's mandibles clicked again, a sound that was almost sad. You saw the flaw, but you did not use it. We did not understand. Elias sighed. You're not the enemy. Not anymore. The creature took a step forward. Its movements were still clumsy, but there was a new urgency to them. The core, it is stable now. But the swarm, they are coming back. They are angry. Elias's blood ran cold. Angry? At what? At you. At me. At the flaw. The creature's mandibles clicked frantically now. They will destroy the colony. To silence the song. Elias stared at the creature. It wasn't a threat. It was a victim, a casualty of his own past. And it was the only one who could help him now. All right, Elias said, hefting his rifle. What do we do? The creature's eyes focused on him. The weapon. The one that silences the song. You must use it. Elias froze. No, I won't. The creature's mandibles clicked, a sound that was almost pleading. It is the only way. To save them. To save us. Elias's mind raced. The weapon. The neurotoxin. It was stored in a secure vault deep in the colony's archives. A relic of the war. A weapon he'd sworn to destroy. But now, it was the only way to stop the swarm. To save Lena. To save the colony. He looked at the creature, at its broken, trembling form. The flaw had shattered it, turned it into something human, something afraid. Where is the weapon? Elias asked, his voice barely a whisper. The vault was located in the deepest level of the colony, a place few ever visited. The air was cold, the walls lined with shelves of outdated technology and forgotten research. The creature led the way, its movements still clumsy, but its purpose clear. This is it, the creature said, stopping before a heavy metal door. Its mandibles clicked, a sound that was almost reverent. Elias entered the access code, the door sliding open with a groan. Inside, the vault was a tomb of his past. Rows of canisters, each labeled with a biohazard symbol. The weapon. He pulled one from the shelf, its weight familiar in his hands. The neurotoxin. A single dose could disrupt an entire hive, but it could also do something else. Something he'd never told anyone. What else does it do? Elias asked, turning to the creature. The creature's eyes darted around the room. It breaks the song, but it also creates a new resonance, a new voice. Elias frowned. What do you mean? The creature's mandibles clicked, a sound that was almost excited. The flaw. It is not just a weakness. It is a seed, a beginning, of individuality. Elias stared at the canister. The weapon didn't just destroy hives. It could create them, turn individuals into something new, something like the creature before him. Why are you telling me this? Elias asked. The creature's eyes met his. Because I am afraid, but I am also curious. What comes after the song? Elias didn't answer. He activated the canister, the hum of the neurotoxin filling the air. The creature flinched, its mandibles clicking frantically. It will hurt, Elias said. At first. The creature nodded. But after? Elias sighed. I don't know. Maybe peace. He raised the canister, aiming it at the creature. Then, he hesitated. The flaw had shattered the swarm, but it had also created something new. Something alive. Close your eyes, Elias said. The creature obeyed, its body trembling. Elias fired. The neurotoxin sprayed in a fine mist, enveloping the creature. It screamed, a raw, individual sound, and collapsed to the floor. Elias waited. The seconds stretched into minutes. Then, the creature stirred. It sat up, its eyes open. They were no longer multifaceted. They were human, brown, frightened. Who am I? The creature asked, its voice trembling. Elias stared at it. The weapon hadn't just disrupted the hive. It had given it a mind, a soul. I don't know, Elias said, his voice barely a whisper. The creature, no, the person, stared at its hands, its fingers flexing as if testing their reality. I have a name. Elias shook his head. The swarm didn't have names. Not like we do. The person, let's call him Kale, looked up at Elias, his eyes wide with confusion. What am I? You're free, Elias said, though the word felt inadequate. Kale's gaze drifted to the canister in Elias's hands. That did this. Elias nodded. It breaks the hive, but it also gives you something. A mind of your own. Kale's mandibles clicked, but the sound was different now. Slower, more deliberate. I feel things. Fear, curiosity, but not the song. Elias sighed. The song is gone, but so is the hive. You're on your own now. Kale stood up, his movements still clumsy but more controlled. Where do I go? Elias hesitated. I don't know. The colony is still in danger. The swarm is coming. Kale's eyes narrowed. The swarm, they are angry. Because of me. Elias nodded. Because of the flaw. Because of what you've become. Kale looked at his hands again, then at Elias. Help me. Help them. Elias stared at him. The weapon had created a new kind of being. One that was neither fully hive nor fully individual. And it was looking to him for guidance. All right, Elias said, hefting the canister. But you have to stay behind me. Understand? Kale nodded. I understand. They moved through the corridors, the silence broken only by the hum of the fusion core and Kale's tentative footsteps. The swarm was still out there.
Story over. Subscribe for a new sci-fi story every day.